So first, let's speak about what feedback is. As we all know, traditionally, a long time ago, feedback was perceived as a situation when you would address single issue without any contextual guidance. It was mostly a one-sided deliver from a senior team member to a junior team member. It was through some very formal annual review or some like hastily arranged meetings. It was usually top-down. That went through a significant rethink, and the situation right now is that the real value of feedback can only be understood when it's featured at the heart of everyday activities, and if it is a part of the culture, not only work culture, but basically any culture, any relationship that we have around us can be a feedback circumstance or situation. But what is very essentially important about how we rethought the definition of the feedback is it can go in all directions. The most useful one is if it's peer-to-peer. Sorry, just need to pop to the second slide. So basically, if we want to understand feedback to its core, let's take it as a conversation. This is just the myth buster, because feedback has some very scientific definitions, but it's basically a conversation of two or even more people who are actually trying to uncover what it is about each other's behavior and work or communication or any other style that is contributing or inhibiting any kind of performance, any kind of relationship. So basically, feedback is a communication of two or more people that is helping each other grow. So it's two-way street. It requires equal attention of the person who is giving the feedback and the person who is receiving the feedback. It requires participation, and it requires skills from both of them, from the giver and the receiver. Because it's easy to take, very easy to take feedback personally, we should all think about it as a learning opportunity. What do you think? There has been one recent study and survey done. Do you think whether people have hard time on giving or receiving feedback? What do you think is harder for them, to give or receive feedback? Any thoughts?
You can write your answers into chat. I see one giving feedback from Laura Gil.
Anybody else wants to share their point? Is it harder for you to give or receive feedback? What would you say if you were to fill in this survey? Harder to receive.
Maxine, harder to receive.
Okay. 59 respondents to this survey said it was harder for them to give feedback. And it has been confirmed by multiple studies and surveys that have been done before that it's harder for people to give the feedback. It's harder to receive. Yeah, it is hard to receive either, I would say, but more people were frightened to give the feedback, mostly because people, especially leaders who are the first-time leaders or were recently promoted to this position, have never had the training actually how to give feedback properly, and they refrain from doing it because they simply think it won't be taken as it should be, and mostly it doesn't, because it's not given properly, and we will speak more about that. It's harder to give due to the fact that to give you need to be careful with what you say. What you say, how you say it, your nonverbal language, there are many, many things around it, how to give feedback and not to be taken personally. Thank you. So, one step more. What is constructive feedback? We were speaking about the feedback. It's a two-way communication of two or more people. But constructive feedback is a kind of supportive feedback that helps you to identify your blind spots. Yeah, it's very good for you to identify where your blind spots lie and how you can address them, how you can actually see your blind spots and weaknesses and what you can do about them. Each feedback, each constructive feedback should be supported with actions or some suggestions or some, why not, coaching, what you can and how you can improve some things. Of course, it takes time to get to that point, but it's part of constructive feedback. We'll talk about what feedback consists of later on. So, constructive feedback always should come with positive intentions, and it's used as a supportive communication tool to address specific issues, specific concerns. Constructive feedbacks help people grow, help them, create new skills, new capabilities, new roles, help them develop, help them create more positive and engaging relationships at workplace or outside of workplace. And it helps generally teams reach their goals and drive value, business value, or any value. So what makes feedback constructive? Let's first see what is destructive feedback, so we can easily then see what constructive feedback is. So basically, destructive feedback points at faults, and it's a direct attack on the individual. It addresses the person, not their behavior. Anything that comes like this, you're wrong, that is not how we are doing things around here, or you have no idea what you're doing, that is not constructive feedback. That is a direct attack. And in these situations, it's very normal for the person to start behaving defensively and just, listening in order to defend themselves. And a person is not learning a thing out of this feedback. So here are some tips for making feedback constructive. First of all, you should try to avoid making any kind of assumptions or interpretations. We all view the world through our own lenses and our own filters, and it's very easy to make assumption for which we are going to think it's 100% true, and it cannot be further than that. So constructive feedback always should rely on facts, on what you see and hear without adding your interpretation to it. So you address the behavior of what you see and what you hear without interpreting it further. Again, what I already pointed out, you should always focus on behavior and not on the person. That's what constructive feedback is all about, because it's not one behavior that defines the person. Because when you say you are like this or like that, you attack the whole personality. And there are many, many, many behaviors that form our personality. So we cannot just say that personality equals behavior, because we have many different behaviors. We should focus on things that can be changed. If you're giving feedback to a person about the things they cannot change and they have no power over it, that it doesn't make it constructive at all. Actually, it further takes them away the power and accountability. And what I already told, that what makes the constructive feedback really constructive is that it should come with a specific solution or recommendation. That's, I think, something that prominently qualifies for constructive feedback. Any questions so far? Sorry, maybe I'm talking too fast. Please just interrupt me whenever you want to ask any question. Just note that I cannot see you because I have the presentation.
Oh, we do have a question. Let me
okay.
ask Abdullah Sharif to unmute your microphone and ask your question. Abdullah, can you unmute your microphone?
Yes, you need to unmute first.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm from Sierra Leone, West Africa. I'm enjoying the classes actually, although we are having poor connection. So for me, the feedback, according to the way the class is going, is very, very good. The note is not in big sentences that can make us very difficult, that can make it very difficult for us to read and understand.
That's good.
Yes, so that's my own comment here, not questions.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much for your feedback. And any other questions or comments or suggestions? Anything? If no, I will move further, and we will have time, of course, after the presentation to talk about it. Okay. So there are some points I want to clarify around feedback. First of all, feedback needs to be fair, grounded in truth, and goal-oriented. One of the major reasons why people really fear of feedback is previously it has been used as a tool to criticize people. Feedback also must be balanced. I'm not sure if you have heard of sandwich technique. It's a very old technique around giving feedback, that you should always give a positive, reinforcing feedback at the beginning, then a sort of negative feedback, and then again the positive feedback to just balance it. It has its own pros and cons. I will talk about it later. What's also very important, and what I emphasized at the beginning, that the feedback is a two-way street. It's the feedback between workers, teams, seniors, juniors. It shouldn't be, and it cannot be controlled by one stakeholder. Feedback should not be coming from one person in the organization, should not be top-down, should be cross-organizational, cross-functional, cross-team, peer-to-peer. And then and only then it has the value for any kind of organization. Okay, now let's see what feedback as a communicative tool is and what isn't. First of all, it's skill. To put it more, to put it in a different words, it's a habit. The more you practice it, you're better at it, in both ways, in giving it and receiving it. It's definitely a way to improve any kind of business results, not only business results, any results you want to achieve in life. It's a collaborative tool. It should be based on facts. It's about asking questions. It's about listening to answers. It's about building stronger relationships. It's about being positive and being development and improvement oriented. It should be frequent. Like I said at the beginning, feedback sessions are not reserved to be happening twice a year or even less than that. Most useful feedbacks are now given at least once a month if we are speaking about a workplace situation. And it helps people to succeed. What feedback is not? It's not constructive criticism. It's not bad attitude. It definitely isn't yelling at others. It's not making others learn a lesson. It's not punishment. It's not focused on what others are doing wrong, or at least not just that. It's not giving orders. It's not taking your side and strongly defending it. And it shouldn't be personal. It's easier said than done, but it's just important to make this differentiation and to understand what good feedback is and what it definitely is not. Any comments on this or any questions you might have?
I would just comment, you mentioned something about punishment.
Yeah.
And it makes me think that there's a lot of businesses give feedback through compensation programs like rewards, employee of the month.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of an indirect way to actually talk about what they're doing right.
Yep.
Because a lot of employees might think, well, what did that person do correctly? I don't understand.
Well, Yeah, of course, a lot of people, a lot of companies have this kind of recognition programs, right? Well, I do think that transparency around it and explaining why somebody was rewarded or awarded should be clear, and that we know that a certain person, reached certain goals or targets, and he was actually recognized for that. Um, but that's kind of recognition program. I'm not sure if I got your question. You're telling me what is the difference or how to?
I guess sometimes businesses give feedback through rewards and punishment.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Oh, yes, they do. They do. I have to agree with this. I'm not sure if it is if it is done in the right way. Okay, it is okay. If it is clear why somebody was recognized and rewarded and why somebody was punished, then it's okay. It creates the structure. Any company, any workplace needs to have the clear structure and the policies and the procedures that says, if you do this, you will be rewarded. If you do that, you will be disciplined. Let's say not punished, be disciplined. And I think it's quite fair and reasonable as long as it is transparent, clear, and it's the same for everyone in the company. That's the main thing about this program. Okay, any more questions? I see people are joining all the time. Somebody said feedback given constructively aids communication. Okay. Okay, good. Let's move on. So when do you provide feedback? First is when you want something to change, specifically some behavior to change of your coworker, parent, colleague, sibling, whoever. When you want something to continue, people don't know if they're doing something well and right if you don't tell them. So if you want to do the positive reinforcement, use the feedback to reinforce the positive things. When you are doing something wrong or when you are doing something right, you should start normalizing asking for feedback. That will make you much better feedback receiver during the time. So here is the feedback planning process, and we'll go through the list. So these are the steps, how you should prepare when you want to give the feedback. So there is the prepare session, share session, ask, listen, action, praise, in this order. It may sound like, it may look like, not, I wouldn't say difficult, but it does look maybe too much of that. But once you start doing it, it will get easier and easier to go through all these steps one by one. So let's see how it goes. To prepare, it means actually to, if you had any previous feedback notes or if you had previous feedback sessions with this person, let's now see if it's a workplace situation and you're preparing to give the feedback to your peer, coworker, team member, whoever. You just need to get back to the previous feedback sessions. Hopefully you will get something you would refer to. Next thing is to pick up and make sure you have all factual data and behaviors you want to share. Some very specific examples you want to share. It's very important you should not dance around the topic of what you want to say or communicate to the person about the behavior you want to see changed. You should be very specific about it to reinforce it with examples, specific situations when this behavior occurred, facts, dates, whatever that can help this person remind themselves of these situations and know what you're talking about. But you need to be very specific. That's why you need to prepare these feedback notes with these specific examples and situations of the behavior. So it would be good. It's not always possible, but it would be good if you know about the person's communication style. If any of you were at my previous sessions when we were talking about communication styles, you would remember that we were talking that there are 4 basic communication styles. There's assertive communication style, passive, passive-aggressive, and aggressive. So it would be good if you already know what is the communication style of the person you are giving the feedback, so you can prepare yourself to how they are going to respond to you. If they are aggressive, they might start yelling, being too loud. If they are passive aggressive, they might start denying. So it's just better for you if you do know their communication style in advance. It's very good to form your feedback in mostly 1, 2 to 3 lines. It shouldn't be a narrative. It shouldn't be a storytelling. It shouldn't be a novel that you're going to read to them, because the substance, the core substance of your feedback is going to be lost in your words. So try to create just 2 lines that are full of substance and meaning of what you're trying to convey as a message to them in your feedback. Very important thing is that you should be in the right frame of mind. It's very, very good that when you have an urge to give a feedback to a person and you're not emotionally regulated, it's not the best time to give the feedback. Okay, just go sleep it over and give the feedback tomorrow. There shouldn't be any kind of emotional outburst on your end when you give the feedback. And one more important thing is you should pay attention to your nonverbal language. We already spoke how important that almost 57% of our communication is our nonverbal language. How you sit, the tone of your voice, everything matters. Any questions on this stage? Okay, let's move.
I do not see any questions.
Okay. Sure. When we come to this step, it's very important to say that you should always offer feedback privately. That's very important. There shouldn't be any audience around you. It's always one-on-one. There is an opening statement. I will share it with you later some language that you can use as an opening statement, and how to share your motive, how to share the gap between what was expected and what was reality of the behavior. Then, like I said, you already have your notes prepared. You should refer back to the facts or examples, so the feedback receiver knows exactly what you're talking about. Again, keep your emotions in check when you share the feedback. It's very important to pay attention to your emotions. And once more, this is very important, just stick to the facts. Try to avoid any interpretation or assumption or anything else that is not objective but very subjective. I see Michael raising his hand, right? You have to unmute. Just
Yes.
unmute. Yes, now I can hear you now.
Good day, everyone. My name is Michael. I'm from Nigeria.
Hi, Michael.
Yeah, I like your session. Thank you very much for the extent you have gone in trying to tell us about feedback. But my question is, at what stage do you give feedback, for instance, to an organization? I don't know if you get at my question, please.
Not sure if I understood the question. Can you repeat it one more? Sorry.
Yes. At what stage do you give feedback, for instance, to the organization you work for? Then secondly, did you get the first question?
No. At what
Yeah.
stage?
The first question is, Can you give feedback to an organization?
Yes. At what stage do you give feedback to an organization?
To give feedback to an organization.
Yes.
Not
An
just the
organization.
person, but to the way the whole organization is doing something.
The best time to give feedback to the organization is the exit interview. Kidding, but not kidding. So people are mostly very truthful and open when they are leaving the company to give their feedback to the organization. But I'm curious, why would you think of giving the feedback to the organization as a general?
Now, for instance, you notice that your organization is not doing the right thing.
Okay.
They are only out,
Mhm.
they are only trying to always out to maximize their profits
Mhm.
at the expense of operations.
Mhm.
Now, at what stage do you give them feedback? And then secondly,
Mhm.
some feedback
Mhm.
are not viewed as constructive feedback.
Mhm.
They are viewed the other way,
Mhm.
you know, as if you are trying to have your way, which is not the truth.
Mhm.
So at what stage do you really give out this feedback? Thank you very much.
I'm trying to answer the second question now. You can do the best on your end. You can really prepare and share the feedback and do everything like, by the book when it comes to the constructive feedback. And that is what you can do. And that is what is on your end and what you can influence and manage. But you can never manage how the other side is going to accept your feedback. So you can be 100% positive, optimistic, good intentional, constructive in your feedback, but it's not on your end to decide how is other person going to accept it. So what I'm saying, you can do all the best in giving the feedback, and still the other person will not be in the point of self-awareness where they would be able to accept it. And there's nothing pretty much you can do about that.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Let's go to the next question. Thank you very much, Michael. Ikbakai. Let's go
Yes,
to
thank you very
Cliff
much.
Martins.
Thank you, Dr.
Go ahead, Cliff Martins. Can you speak?
Oh, I can't hear you.
It's hard to hear you.
It's hard to hear you. You might want to type down your question. It's nearly impossible to hear you.
Yeah, it would be better to write your question into the chat.
My name is Cliff. Okay. If you can get it louder, my question.
Yeah, it would be better to if you could write down your question, because we really can't hear you. Jacqueline, and yeah. Whoever wants to go next.
Jacqueline?
Hi. Yes, morning everyone. I'm from Jamaica. I'm happy to be in this session. One way that I just wanted to add to the question that was asked earlier around how does organization how can you provide feedback to an organization? One way that we do that in our organization here is through what we call the employee opinion or satisfaction survey, where employees get an opportunity to provide feedback on things that the company is doing right or not doing correct. And we find this information very useful, and it's actually used to make changes, whether to implement programs or initiatives or to discontinue doing some things.
a very good point. That's a very good point, Jacqueline. Actually, there are all sorts of employee satisfaction surveys. Some are done on an annual basis. There are pulse surveys that are done more frequently that check the pulse of the organization. And yeah, very good point. Thanks for sharing it. Okay, who's next? I can't see all the people who raised hands, so if there is anybody else. If not,
Nabaraj, Achaidya, go ahead.
Okay, good evening.
Good to meet you.
I'm from Nepal. So am I audible?
yes.
So it's not my question. I like to add a little bit about the feedback in the field of teaching learning process, as I am from this field. So if we give feedback and that feedback can reflect, or if that feedback encourage student to reflect in the learning process, then that will give students a bit more output, positive output. So it is not about the organization, is about teaching learning process. So in teaching learning process, feedback play a vital role to enhance their learning. So if feedback could engage students to reflect on their process, on their actions, so that will contribute a lot in teaching learning process. Thank you.
Totally. I couldn't agree more with you. Actually, there is something which is called instant feedback. So you don't wait for the feedback session to give feedback, especially in this teaching learning sessions. When you instantly give feedback, you don't have too much time to prepare. You just, spot the mistake or the error, and you give the feedback to the person how to address it and how to correct it. So, of course, thank you for sharing this.
Lana Stamenkovic, I have a question.
Sure.
We have a course on business communications, which talks about how to write letters and how to, business communication. To what extent does feedback fit into business communication?
Well, to what extent, I would say feedback culture is should be substantial part of company cultures nowadays, and it is, and it's becoming increasingly more and more important. So companies are now really making it a big thing, much more than it was before. So there are a lot of trainings on how to give feedback, how to receive feedback. I know it's kind of very big thing now. It is. I wouldn't say it's kind of business communication. Okay, it can go in that kind of a subcategory of business communication on how to give and receive feedback, but it's irrelevant how we're going to categorize it. It's just very important to understand the importance of it and to understand that it is a skill that should be trained, that people are not born with this skill. It sounds easy to give feedback, but to give it in a good way, it's definitely not easy. So it's just to understand the importance of it and to integrate it as a part of the trainings that the company will provide to its people.
Like, I think what I get the sense of what you're presenting here is you're presenting a person-to-person conversation communication.
Yes.
But then a lot of feedback will actually be given through emails, memos.
Yeah. I would be quite honest with you. I think the feedback should always be one-on-one in personal communication. Of course, it's not always possible to be like that, because a lot of things that you want to say and express are lost when you put it in the writing. You don't have that nonverbal communication. You do not have that kind of positive reinforcement that you can do with your gesticulation, with your smiles, with your head nods and other things. So a lot of the tone of the message is lost when you put it in the writing. But of course, there are situations when you need to do it through the written communication. It's basically, you should follow the same pattern that I'm presenting like here. You should prepare, share, ask questions, listen. The point is always that the other side has its fair share of time to ask questions, to provide their answers. So you should listen to them as well. I can't see how efficiently it can be done through writing. Of course, it can if it must be done that way, but I would really avoid it to be done in the written. I would prefer it done either of these Zoom sessions, but at least it's face-to-face. Okay, let's continue. I'll get to your questions later after the session, don't worry. So, like I said, once when you stated out the situations, the behavior you addressed, and you now need to ask, it's very good to ask open-ended questions. I will get back later to that through one example, what open-ended questions are, because you want to prompt the conversation. You want to have the real conversation now going and taking place. This is probably the most important part of the feedback session, is when you get into the conversation and try to understand what is behind the behavior that you have observed. It's very important to remain silent, not to interrupt, to allow the time to respond to the person who is receiving the feedback. It says that you, in order to be a good listener, you should speak about 25% of your time and listen to the other 75% of your time. So I just want to point out how important for you is to now not only listen, but try to understand what the other person is telling you, because very often you will get information or the fact that you didn't know before that may completely or to some extent change your personal beliefs or understanding or perception of the situation and the behavior. So it's very important that you listen attentively. It's very important that you didn't come to the feedback session with the thought that you know 100% of everything. You should remain inquisitive, curious to understand what is under the behavior of this person. What is the reason the person has been behaving or in this or that manner. Of course, pay attention to the words, to the tone, to the voice, to the body language. Try to really remain focused to observe the person and what the person is telling you. That is very, very important. The action part is conversation. This is a real conversation. The goal of this point is to have the mutual understanding. Now that you have spoken your part, the other person spoke about their concerns, share their point of view, communicated their opinions. Now there should be at least be some kind of engaging conversation where you would come to that kind of, which is the mutual understanding. It's not easy. Sometimes it's not even possible to reach to this part at the feedback session, but it's a goal. It's a goal. Let's put it this way. This action step should lead us to commit to specific actions, to specific results, to specific time frames in which we would like to see the behavior to change. For example, we should commit that we will create certain activities that will lead to certain results within the certain timeline. This is what our aim is, to have this understanding and have this mutual goal. I'm repeating it one more time. It's not always possible to happen at each and every feedback session. But the more we practice it, the better we are in giving feedback, the better listener we are. It will become more and more frequent that we will establish this action part to be successful. Okay, like I was telling you about the praise and the sandwich technique, which is good. But on the other hand, it is not always possible, and sometimes it's not always useful to follow negative feedback with positive feedback, or vice versa, positive feedback with negative feedback. Sometimes you really want to focus only on the negative feedback because it's important. If certain behaviors that have been bothering you have been repeating over the time, you really want to focus on that negative behavior and to address only that without giving positive feedback to balance it out. So this sandwich technique was very commonly used before, but now people are, and I think it's quite right, are not using it for every single feedback session, right? On the other hand, one of the reasons that people are fearful of feedback sessions because before it was associated with negative feedback. So in order to balance this out, you should really make time to give just positive feedback, to pre-plan the feedback session in order to give just reflect on some positive behavior that you want to see repeated in some future time. Okay, any questions? Now I see.
Oh, I just wrote some things there explaining that students can write a new assignment, a new course on this topic.
Okay, perfect. Now, here are some just language that you can use actually through the opening statements, through the share sessions, or some open-ended questions. For example, this is just an example. Of course, you can say, thanks for meeting with me. I appreciate you taking the time to talk with me. I'd like to share with you my observations, and then invite you to respond. How does this sound? This sounds very inviting. It doesn't sound terrifying. It doesn't sound like I'm going to be attacked or I'm going to be accused of something. It's very, very inviting. I'd like to share with you my observations. So it's not the ultimate truth that I'm going to share with you. It is my observations, and let's talk about it. The second is describe the gap using facts, share session. For example, the reason why I'd like to bring the situation up is because I think if we talk about it now, it will help to improve the quality of our working relationship. And this is the situation you want to reflect on. 2 weeks ago at the meeting, you snapped at me, and I felt like you were not giving me time and opportunity to share my views of the project. This is very powerful sentence construct. You say how you felt about the behavior. You are not putting any kind of etiquette on the person, calling her names. You're like this or you're like that. You were simply stating how certain behavior made you feel. It's about how it made you feel, not about how the other person is. And then again, it is also very inviting, and it's not putting the other person in a way that they feel they need to defend themselves from you. So when you want to share how certain behavior made you, when you want to share feedback about certain behavior, it's very important to use those I sentences, not you sentences. So I felt like this or like that when you do this or that. It's very powerful combination. And those are very powerful open-ended questions. So these are all inviting questions for the other person to contribute to the conversation and for you to understand what really happened. What do you think happened? Can you expand on that? What made you react that way? This is a very good one. Did I somehow trigger you into that reaction? How would you summarize the situation? What is your perspective? Tell me more. The most powerful one. Tell me more. Share with me the specific details. What can you share with me about this? Very, very good open-ended questions that you can use practically for any single feedback session. Practically for any. Okay, any comments on that or any questions?
Yes, there is a question from Hannah Gilberts.
Okay. Can't hear you. Can't hear you, Hannah.
Yeah, Hannah, you will have to write your question into the chat box because there's a sound issue. But we do have a question back up here. If I can go back up and find it. Here we go. This is from Cliff Martins. How true is the fact that giving and receiving feedback is highly influenced by perception and attitude? This is greatly, and these are influenced by people's level of education, perception and attitude.
I think it's influenced by everything, practically. For example, the place I'm coming from, the country I'm coming from, feedback is not part of our culture. Okay, so it's influenced by practically everything, the culture you're coming from, your background, upbringing, your self-awareness level. There are a lot of things that really model how receptive you're going to be around feedback. But again, I said it before, I said it one more time, it's a skill that you can build on. So it's just what is important is to understand that being receptive of feedback can only help you grow. You might not want to agree with all the feedback that you will receive, and it's not necessary for you to grow. What is important is to take it and to thank the person who gave you the feedback. It's very important to thank the person who gave you the feedback, regardless if it was coming from the good place or the bad place. It's not important, but it will help you grow in this or that way. When you're becoming more and more receptive to getting feedback and not taking it personally, it can only benefit you. But to get back to the question, how receptive and how much of inner peace you're going to have when you receive the feedback, it depends on so many internal and external things around you. Okay, is there anything else?
No, don't see any more questions yet. We're waiting for Hannah to write her question into chat.
Yes. Okay, here are more lines that you can use in this stages of the feedback process. Clarification stage. For example, you can say, before we continue, let me make sure I have captured what you said. Or when you want to reframe, you can say, what I thought I heard you say was. This is very important. Specifically, if you're not sure if you understood correctly what you heard the other person said. So don't interpret in your own way. Just try to get the exact words that the person told you, the exact meaning. Don't use your own interpretation of the words that you heard. So next step, action and praise. I already spoke about it. It's offering your help if needed to this person. You can say, I would like to help you in solving this problem. What ideas do you have? You don't have always necessarily offer solutions. You can just offer support and help in actually getting to solutions, but don't always strive to give the solution to the people. Sometimes it can create more damage than actually just making them give the solutions to you. And there's just a few more slides. I'm sorry, we don't have too much time. Where to go from here? There's just number one, the first reason why feedback falls off the radar. It's kind of we're too busy, especially in the workplace nowadays. People are too busy to give feedback to each other. And we should make time to give feedback, and we should make time to ask for the feedback. But I already told you to try to make it a habit. You should go to people and ask for the feedback. More than often, people would be surprised with this active approach and requesting the feedback, but it will definitely help you to normalize receiving feedback and to be more at ease when the situation happens and somebody says, for example, unexpectedly, oh, I have some feedback for you. You would feel more at ease because you would be prepared and kind of normalize these situations.
Okay, we do have a question from the Hannah.
Okay, sure, Lana.
She's talking about when is the good time to do these feedback? Immediately after something happened, or do you want to do it quarterly, weekly, yearly? How do you want to give?
There is no rule, I would say. If the situation that if there is a need, there should be an instant feedback. For example, something happened that you don't want to wait too much to give feedback for. But what is important, you should really avoid to give the feedback if you're not emotionally stable. Regardless of how much the situation or behavior might have upset you, you should really avoid giving feedback until you're completely emotionally stable. But of course, you can give the instant feedback if there is a reason for that. There could be weekly feedback sessions, monthly feedback sessions, quarterly. It really depends on the team dynamics, on the need for that. Of course, speaking about a work environment, if this is a new team and you're appointed as a new team leader, of course, you would have more frequent feedback, one-on-one feedback sessions with your team members than, for example, if this is the team that has been working together for some quite time and delivering results. I'm just taking one situation. There are a lot more situations that we can reflect on. But there is no kind of rule how many frequent sessions, how many feedback sessions there should be in time. Whenever there is a need for those. Okay, and just here are some tips to keep in mind how to give feedback. Be authentic, be forward focused. It's important to understand that when you give and receive feedback, it always looks for the future. It always addresses your future skills, your future development, your future progress. That's why it's very immensely important. Try to be as objective as possible. Try to be positive. Try to be you must be respectful. I said it numerous times, be very specific. Try to leave out any personal interpretation of the specific behavior. When I say be timely, it means there is not much point giving feedback for the behavior that occurred just once 3 months ago, right? It's very possible that the person won't even be able to recall the situation and to remember what happened. So it's very important in that way to be timely, especially if this situation and this behavior was very important to address. Be humble, also very important. And on the receiving end, stop your first reaction. Our first reaction is to get defensive and to defend ourselves. Try to remember what is the benefit of getting feedback. Listen. Listening is important equally for both parties. Express gratitude to the person who is giving you the feedback. Ask questions in order to understand. And this is important, very much important. This is how it should be. But of course, life is the other thing. So you might get into the situation when you would be on the receiving end of feedback, and it's a kind of situation where the person who is giving you the feedback might not be following all these structure and might not be giving it in the way it should be given. What is important to understand, and I really teach it as a part of my communication courses, and it's one of our assertive rights, and people very often forget about it. You're not obliged, and there is no law about it, to put it this way, that you should provide your answer immediately or response. So if you're, for example, given feedback that you were not expecting, and the person who is giving the feedback is not prepared enough, or you specifically don't agree with the points that the person told you, or you're just very surprised by it, you really don't need to give your answer immediately. If you need some time to follow up, to reflect back, to, understand the situation, to, to recall the situation or the behavior, just ask for it. I need some time to follow up. I'll get back to you in 2 to 3 days or something like this. You're not obliged to give your answer immediately on the feedback session. That's very important to understand. Okay. Any question?
We have many students studying project management. Can you talk about how feedback fits into project management? So as you're trying to manage a project, how to give feedback to make it sure it goes correctly?
Especially if you're a project manager, then I think giving a feedback is one of the most essential part of your job, because being a project manager means you need to keep track of every single task that the people who are within this project are doing. So in order to, keep the deadlines, the budget, and everything else that is under your scope and your accountability, you need to be able to give feedback in a timely and very precise and specific manner to be a good feedback giver in order to keep it going. So I see this one of the key competencies for any project manager, being able to give constructive feedback.
When you're having a team meeting, would you do anything differently as far as the feedback that you're giving to one person?
I would like to give feedback. There is something. If I'm giving the feedback to a single person, I would do it on one basis. I wouldn't do it in front of the other team members. Of course, this is different when I want to give the feedback to the team as a group, right? But again, the steps are the same.
We have a question from Makbior Mangong. Go ahead with your question.
Yes, sir. As you put it to my representative, My question also, a student of political science, as you mentioned, student of project management. I'm also a political science student. What kind of feedback that I should give?
When you say what kind of feedback I should give, to who? To whom? I'm not sure who you want to give feedback to. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you now. And in terms of the work that I will be in the future as a political analyst or whatever, any political activist.
Okay.
So what kind of feedback that I should give? So how I should give a feedback, I mean. Is the same feedback as Sir said as for the student of project management, as he put it clearly. So for me as a political science student, what feedback is comprised of?
Maybe if I can help, maybe look at feedback within the context of negotiation.
Yes, correct.
Like if you're in a negotiation with somebody, how do you give feedback to actually help that negotiating process?
Correct, yes, that's true. That's what I mean, yes.
I would say that negotiation process and feedback are not similar things. For these two processes, let's call them processes, you would need to have not very similar competencies in order to be good at them. Of course, communication skill is one that is more important for both processes, but negotiation is practically the selling skill. In negotiation process, you're trying to win, right? Your goal is not to find the compromise as much as it is in the feedback session. And in feedback, you're not trying to win over somebody, you're trying to find the solution for the problem. So there are not so many similarities between the feedback and the negotiation process, at least not from my perspective.
I don't see any other questions. Just one question here about, can you repeat the explanation on how to give feedback to a team?
Practically, you would follow the same steps. You would prepare for the feedback. You will try to gather as many factual data and situations and facts that you can possibly have about the team progress, about the specific project, about anything you would like to give your feedback on. You will prepare your notes. You will actually share your point of view. You will wait for them to share their views, their concerns, their information. Then you would try to get to the mutual understanding, set certain actions, timelines, and just follow through that. So basically, there is not so much difference when you're giving the feedback to the team as when you're giving it to the one person, except that when you're giving it to a person, it's always one-to-one, one-on-one conversation.
We have a question from Agnes Onisa. Go ahead.
Hi, thank you for the presentation. I just have a question. Earlier, you had mentioned that feedback is best given on face-to-face, but at times we are in a situation that you have to give feedback. Maybe you reviewed someone's work and you did some quality checks or quality assurance checks, and there is some feedback you need to give, but it has to be in written form, in a report form. So what are some of the tips to write or to give constructive feedback and not sound harsh or condescending in written form?
I mean, just don't use the language you wouldn't use in personal communication. The thing is, of course, my presentation was mostly about how to give feedback on certain behavior. But there are all sorts of feedbacks. You can give some feedback on some technical thing. It can be a technical feedback on a certain project or work or essay or whatever. It's just very important. Don't use the language you wouldn't use in your personal one-on-one communication. Nothing else. I see one more raised hand.
Yes, a question from Mark Bior, Mangong. Not there. I think I saw a question down here. Can you enlighten me question from Paulette? Can you enlighten me on feedback to students in an elementary setting?
Sorry for the interruption. My question is to myself. Is it okay now to ask him a question or after the session?
After the session would be better. Or you can write it into chat. Okay, Lana Stamenkovic, go ahead. Feedback in an elementary setting.
Yeah. When it comes to the elementary setting, it's always good to have the instant feedback situation because students in elementary settings really tend to forget a lot about the things that happen, very soon. So it's always better to use instantly the situation that you want to reflect on or the behavior that you don't want to see repeated instantly. So that's one thing. And also, it's also very important, and teachers in elementary setting always tend to forget that this kind of feedback sessions that are given should be also done one-on-one. Not in the classroom or in front of other students. It's also a teaching experience on one-on-one session, not a group one. If it is a personal feedback that you need to give to one student specifically, not to the whole group.
Now, I would like to ask the students, what were the steps that Lana Stamenkovic gave for feedback? What were those steps? Think about it. Can you think of the first one?
Okay, Andrea?
Let's go to Andrea. And then think about what those steps are, and we'll come back and she will give you that slide again to show you those steps.
Okay, although I wasn't there, I didn't come in early. However, I'm gathering it's more about preparing, sharing, listening, having the action and the praise.
I think one was missing.
One is missing. Timeline, progress, facts, giving the facts. I don't know. I was just taking information, but I was late, so I did not get the.
Very good, though. Very good.
Yes, very good, I would have to say.
Thank you. Which one is missing then?
I didn't hear ask.
Which one is missing? You said one is missing.
Yeah, I didn't hear the one that says ask.
Oh, ask. Okay.
I heard. Go
okay.
ahead. Yeah.
I thought asking was part of the action. So you ask the questions, you discuss the problems, you provide areas for solution. No, you don't provide solutions. You allow the person to provide their own solutions. What you can do, however, is treat it as a conversation where you have mutual understanding, have the person to commit to specific actions and results and the time frame. So I thought in that section here, the questions and answering, you said it was open-ended. I guess, so that the person could actually speak, and instead of giving a simple yes or no, you have more of a dialogue and a discussion, a conversation.
You were very attentive. Kudos to you. Very good. Very good. I'm impressed. Good.
Lana, is there a way that giving feedback just becomes a natural part of communication? Or is it something that somebody has to develop as a skill?
I think the very first skill or the mindset, let's put it this way, we should develop in ourselves. Either we are the ones who are giving or receiving the feedback, is not to take things personally. I think this is the very important mindset that we need to have, because if I'm planning to give you the feedback and I'm taking something personally, that will color the tone of my voice, my emotions, my nonverbal language. It will color everything if I'm taking it personally. And if you are taking it personally, you will definitely not listen to what I'm going to tell you. You will just think how you're going to respond to me. So I think one of the main things is not to take the things personally, not to think that everything is revolving around us and that people are doing something specifically because they want to harm us or they want to make us feel bad or something like this. If we have this thing on our mind every time we go into feedback sessions, I think it will help a lot that this feedback session is going much well and it be much more successful than it would be if we have this thing on our mind that it's a personal thing. Okay.
That might do it. I don't see any more questions here.
Okay. Well, then I would like to thank you. I see that you've been very attentive and listening very well to this. I'm grateful for this, honestly. Thank you for being here and hope to see you soon.
And we want to say thank you so much, Lana Stamenkovic, for coming in and giving this very, very enlightening presentation on feedback, which is really the essence of communication and making improvements in an organization and work and even in life between people.
Thank you all so much.
So I'm going to let everybody unmute their microphones so that they can say thank you to you and say bye. Everybody, you can unmute your microphone.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Very good presentation.
Bye.